If I'm going to have a clip closer together than all the rest of my clips, I like to have it right here. 11 rod, that's perfect for tacking right there. You're going to want to tack this on before you put on all your C-purlin clips. Good morning, everybody. This is John Scarborough. We're back again to talk about some more trusses. Today, these are the same trusses that we went over last time, and what I want to go over now is your clips, spacing, things like that. We didn't go over all of this last time because the video just run just a little bit too long, but also because not every truss has some of these features, so we just want to go over this separately. Without any further ado, this right here, we went out 14 inches. This is just if you need an overhang, or yeah, so it's about 14 inches from the edge of our pipe. So if you need an overhang, you usually don't have to have an overhang. Like if you're building a shop, then you can have a pretty well flush. You can just come over here and trim it out and be just fine. The overhang just looks good on a house, and personally I like to get my water out away from my building. A lot of times you won't see it on a shop, but you will see it on a house. It really is just up to you, and it's up to you how much you want to do. We're actually, in this case, we're going to end up going 2-foot overhang away from our house, which is a little bit more than traditional. A foot might be more like what you would see, but 2 foot is not too far out. The reason we're going 2 foot is because the company accidentally sent us an extra foot per sheet. They accidentally cut it a little bit too long. So rather than wasting it, it's perfectly fine. We'll just bring it out that extra foot. Whatever the case may be, that's what we're going to have right here. So I want to show you, just talk through a little bit how to do that. This is just a piece of angle iron. This does not have to support a lot of weight. This right here is supporting your house or your shop or pole barn, hay barn, whatever this may be. You can build these trusses and turn this into whatever you want. And y'all go back and check that other video out. We got an entire video going through how to put this together and how to make sure you're actually doing this right. Okay, so this is supporting the load of all of the tin, your snow load, it's supporting everything. This piece of angle iron, all this is supporting is that 2 foot of tin or however much tin you're putting out there. So it's not necessary to have this nearly as beefy. I've seen people come out here and have an entire I-beam sitting right here. It's not necessary. You don't have to have it. Now, if you've got the scrap material, go ahead, but you don't have to have it. In this case, all I used, and let me say this clearly, y'all look at your codes if you're building something that you have to have within code or spec. I'm telling you what I'm doing on this pole barn. You can do whatever you want, but some places have to be built within code, some places don't. So look at that, but all I'm doing is showing you what we're doing here as a good example, okay? But in this case, I just used 3x3 angle iron. Works really good. All I do is I tack it right here. It's just floating in space. You see how it's not connected anywhere except for right there. Okay, come on back out. Okay, this is just floating in space right here, and I put one weld right here. I make sure that I'm level here, so I put a little torpedo level on this and make sure it's the same level as this. Now in theory, when you build these, this is level, but if it happens to be riding one line or riding the other line, then just make sure that this matches, okay? Get that level, and then this right here is just a piece of 4-inch C-purlin. You can use whatever you want. You're gonna wanna tack this on before you put on all your C-purlin clips. These are clips to hold on your C-purlin. So do this before you put these clips on, okay? To me, that's easier. You could put all your clips on and then run your string line and stuff, but to me, this just makes it easy. I clamp, I got 3 of these. I take one and I clamp it right here at the peak, right here, and then your last one, you'll clamp right here. You're gonna have a piece of string that's gonna be tied or clamped up there to that one. You're gonna run that piece of string down here, and you're probably gonna need some help with this. You're gonna take that string and move it in and out, and that string is gonna move in and out and touch this, okay? You're going to bring it, touch it to this, okay, and that's representing a nice straight line. Now, you could run that string line flat across here, but when you just take 2 points like this, you get rid of any concern like it might be bumping a weld like this. You just don't have to worry about any of this. It creates 2 easy points of contact, and you're much more likely to just be able to get it without any trouble. So you bring that in and out. You tack this top and bottom, ideally pulled this way towards me just a little bit. And then this other one will already be clamped here. Then as somebody's holding that string right where it needs to go, then you're going to, the next thing you're going to do, you're going to be ready to pull this in and out. Now your next step, once you have that ready, your next step after getting one tack here and one tack there is to lay a piece of plate right here and put a tack here and here. Now, this could change depending on what you're working with, so find an easy method for this. But this is what I've done here, and this works really, really easy. A piece of plate works really well. I put a tack right here, and I put a tack right here, and I left this free floating. So it's sitting here, not tacked to this at all. This is still able to move in and out, but it's tacked solid right here and laying flat. Then I have my piece tacked on here. I pull it away from my string just a little bit, so my string line's laying here, and you would just have it back some, and then you would be able to move it where it needs to go, close that gap till you're right there, and then you would tack it off till you're just exactly where you need to be. So what that looks like over here, remember this is going to be tacked on right here. This is going to be tacked right here, but you're not tacked here. So this whole piece still moves in and out. You'll take this, it will be slightly pulled away from your string here, and then you're going to stand right here with a welding rod, and you're going to just barely move it out until it touches your string. You've got someone else holding it in place, confirming that this string is sitting where it needs to sit. You come right in, and you just pull this right where it needs to go, and then put your little small tack right there. Now this is actually a really good place to tack this with 6011. A lot of people, they talk about welding stuff out with 6011, or you just kind of talk about different types of rods that you would use. But a 6010 is a little bit harder to tack with. It's plenty fine, and I tack with it all the time. But it does make it easier if you want to get up here with one hand and you're having to move something around by yourself. You want to get in here and you just want to barely get a tack at just the right moment. Sometimes that 6011 could be easier to do that with. With that being said, it's not going to be as flexible. So when you make these 2 tacks, you might make them with a 7018, and that gives you your flexibility. And then take your 6011, you've already got this tacked in place, and your 6011 rod, that's perfect for tacking right there, because it'll just about strike up when you're an inch away, which is why they don't use these on professional settings, because they arc way too far back and they can cause other problems. But it's perfect when you need to get a tack like that in. It's actually really good for getting everything else in here tacked. Okay, so you can see right here we've got these 2 really close together. These are where some purlins are going to be. You want your purlin as far out on this as you can, and then the tin will come out a little bit farther. We don't need this purlin here. This purlin could have been set somewhere in here. All of these from here all the way back are set the same distance apart, okay? But you don't need this one here. You could have set it here. You could have split your difference and been just fine. There would have been no reason why you couldn't. And I have done that on other jobs. Like on my shop over here, it's got around the, it's similar to the same build. Not exactly the same, but we won't go over that. But I chose to set that purlin about right here rather than right here. So the reason I want to set the purlin here is because I may want to enclose this this ceiling in here, and if I choose to have this ceiling enclosed, having this purlin here goes ahead and closes that entire gap off. It goes ahead and makes that completely closed. I don't have to come back later and worry about that. So that's why I went ahead and opted to put that right there. Plus, personally, come around here, I like, it's not necessary, you don't have to have it at all. I just like to have one of my purlins sitting right over top of my pipe. Like I said, not necessary. That's just me. It's a personal preference. I like to do that if I can. So that's where that is. That ended up being 14 inches. It's fine. If I'm going to have a clip closer together than all the rest of my clips, I like to have it right here because that's where all your wind load is. So when your wind is coming in, you know, this building, imagine it standing here and a tornado or something, all that wind is coming up, it's hitting right there. And if you've ever seen an old barn or something where there's screws, sometimes even nails, which is terrible. I hate metal that's nailed together. But anyway, that's a story for a different day. You've got those sheets and they're sitting here and you can see them when the wind's flipping. It's right there on that outside edge. That's where it starts flipping, okay? That's where the majority of your wind is. So by having two of them right there, you know, push your two when you got to have some sitting closer together. I like to have them on this side. That's my personal preference. If somebody else out there has built a lot of these buildings and they have a reason for doing it another way, throw it in the comments. I'd love to see it. All right, come on down the line. On this building, we've set these purlins 3 foot apart, okay? I'm not going to tell you when you need to put them, where you need to put them, okay? You need to look that up for yourself. Look up all of those specs for yourself. I'm telling you how I'm building this building, okay? When you are on a 212 pitch, this right here is a 412 pitch, then you can have less purlins, okay? But when you get, so if you're sitting like this and you're a 212 pitch, can you see my hands good, Spanna? You're a 212 pitch, okay? That sheet, all the weight of that sheet and any snow and anything that's sitting on that sheet is pulling downward, okay? So if you're a 212 pitch, there's not as much weight pulling down on those clips. So it's pulling down, the purlin sitting right here, it's pulling down on that clip, okay? When you get to a 412 pitch, you're steeper, like this. That means that all of that weight is pulling more down, is pulling farther down. That is more weight pushing down on these clips. These clips is what holds all of that there, okay? On a wooden building, the rules are different than on a metal building, okay? And that's why I'm telling you to look these specs up for yourself, okay? You can find this information online, the way you need to do this and what your specs are. But by taking your clips and putting, we added 1 extra purlin in here because we're at a 412 pitch. We went ahead and added 1 extra purlin. It depends on where you're at. Find out what your pitch is, go look it up. But 1 extra clip gives you a little bit more strength on the purlin when the weight of the snow or whatever that's sitting up there is pulling down on that tin. It's bearing that pressure down. You've got 1 extra clip all the way down. You've got that 1 extra piece of meat along with that 1 extra purlin that's hanging right there. Okay, with that being said, most places will put 1 tack top and bottom, okay, on the opposite side. So your purlin sits here and that's your downhill side, okay? So they'll tack on their downhill side and they'll weld on their uphill side. And most places, that's enough. That is considered sufficient weld. The reason is because you've got all your upward strength. Your screws lock this in. And these codes are based on whether or not they're screwed and welded. You know, all of this is different, but this building is going to be welded and screwed, okay? So the screws are part of the structural strength of a building like this, okay? So you take that purlin, sit it right there, okay? And that helps resist pull down because your weld is on this uphill side. We know, and we talked about this in the last video, we know that a weld is tested on its pull, its vertical pull, okay? You pick a weld, you pick that straight up, and that's how it's tested. This, I used 80-10 for this weld, so it would be 80,000 pounds per square inch, okay? That's how it's tested on a straight pull, okay? If I were to bend this way, it would have almost no strength, okay? But if I bend it the opposite way, then it has a lot of strength because it's resisting the weld where it's meeting together in that corner. So you have that weld sitting right here on this side. If I bend it this way, I'm just breaking it off. I have nothing to resist, okay? But if I bend against that, then it has to stretch that weld, which causes it, you know, that now you're resisting in a lot different way. So most places consider 2 tacks and a weld because all your pressure is being pushed down. So that's what most places do. I do like to go ahead and put a weld on both sides of that clip, at least on 2 of them, on the bottom 2, because as I said before, that's where a lot of pressure is. But also, personally, I like to use an 80-10 or something better than 60-11. Some people, they think 60-11 is good enough, and I'm not saying it isn't because a lot of people do it. Me personally, I would rather put some 60-10 or something like that on there. I'll leave that up to you to decide because some places are okay. You know, it depends on who you're working for, okay? I used 80-10 on the back side here. I think this back side is the perfect place for someone to practice. So if you've got somebody working for you or working with you or a family member or something like that that can't weld really well, let them get out here and practice on that back side. So you, a good welder, gets on there and puts some good weld on this side, on this uphill side, and then let somebody practice on this side. That way you're getting weld on this other side, you know. And then the other thing is if you don't feel like your welds are perfect, if you don't really feel like your welds are really, really good and top notch, or if you're using 60-11 or something like that, then go ahead and put a weld on both sides. That way you know you're good. All right, guys, so I'm using these clips right here. I bought these clips already pre-cut. This is a 5x7 clip. My purlin is an 8-inch purlin. So I like to stand this up straight right here, and that gives me lots of room to weld when my purlin lays across, because the purlins will run across like this right here. They'll run all the way down. And so I like to put that standing straight up and down so that when I'm up here on top of this, and this is stood up and down, I can put the most weld running all the way down that purlin, and I know I've got enough sufficient weld. You could lay it like this, but then you've only got 5 inches here. If I put it like this, I've got a good 7-inch spot. I can put it up there quick, and I can actually get a full weld. And that is where you're going to put some 60-11. It's a lot easier to use 60-11 when you're up there on that shaky roof. And it's so thin, 60-11 is actually a little bit better for that area, okay? 60-10 is more likely to burn through, especially when you're up there on that truss and it's kind of shaking like this, and you're sitting there and, you know, it's a little bit less stable. Sometimes you only have one hand. 60-11 is better for that. That's what it's made for, is stuff like that. Okay, the other thing is, now, y'all stay for just a little bit longer, because once I get done with this, I got a little bit more to talk about down here, and you're not going to want to miss that. This right here, the way these trusses are laid out, right here is that is your outside wall. Right here is your outside wall. These are obviously inside, okay? So don't lay this right here. Don't make the mistake of putting it like this. Don't make the mistake of putting it like this. Can you see in here good? Okay? This is your outside. When you stack these in like this wall will go all the way down there, okay? And then this bottom one will be the wall all the way in this way. So put this in flush right here. That way your outside wall right here, you can come in. You don't have to worry about cutting this off or anything like that. I know I'm saying that, and as I'm saying it, it sounds simple. But when you come over here and you start building, sometimes you don't think about it. I mean, it's easy to throw it right in the middle, just like I've got these, okay? So with that being said, make sure you get it just like that, flush. On this bottom one, make sure you have it flush. And on these two right here, you want to put them in the middle. Now, why does it matter if you put them in the middle over here? Well, this right here, when those purlins, those are 20-foot purlins. In this case, there are different size purlins for different jobs. In this case, that purlin will be designed to meet right there in the middle. Now, I'm going to use these 4-inch pieces of purlin clips, but this just for an example, but we're actually going to use 8-inch purlin. But this will serve for my example. In these middle pieces, these are going to meet right here in the middle. Perfect. That's the way they meet in a perfect world. Okay, but in an imperfect world, which we live in, there's a lot of variables. Okay, you've only got a 4-inch piece of play here. So if for some reason something shifts, something changes, something down there where the weld pad is, I've gone to jobs where the weld pad won't be set just exactly right. I've gone to jobs where these right here won't be just exactly perfectly level. If you get this 25 foot in the air and you're not perfectly level, that may get off quite a bit up there. Okay, so my point is you want a little room for error. That's what this is. You're sticking this out just in case. And sometimes these 20 foot, supposed to be 20 foot purlins, or sometimes they'll come in 30 foot or whatever, they don't always come perfectly true. So you might get one that's a little off. You might get a whole bundle that's a little off. So if you get a whole bundle that's a little off and you end up like this, you want to make sure that this is right in the middle. That way you've got a lot more play. So this one on the edge, this one on the edge here, these two in the middle, and that's going to give you a lot more play. The other thing is, if you ever, this is your outside wall, if you thought there's a chance in the future that you wanted to extend out on your building, then instead of going like this, you could actually take these clips just for this outside wall, and you could turn them just like this, put them like this. Now what that's doing is, now you've got a weld surface ready. It's set to your 412 pitch or 212 pitch or whatever it is that you're working with. It's already set. These are already welded on. You've already trimmed past your 10. Everything's there. It's already set. It's ready to go. So if you think that in the future you could be adding on, then this is an easy step to go ahead and do. If you're not going to do that, if you don't, for sure you're not planning on going out, like I'm not planning on coming out on this building, then do it like this, just because it gives you less to trim around. So this right here, this is 70/18 on this clip. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to have this clip. This is your edge clip. This is that piece of angle iron. View out just for a minute that we're show everybody what we were talking about. You don't necessarily have to have 70/18 there, although it doesn't hurt, because like I said, that's where your wind load is, okay? But your 70/18 is really for this clip. So what I did is I ground out, and then I put in my root, and then I came back with my 70/18. First, I put a little pass over here. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to, but when you're tying in, when you've got a piece meeting right here and a piece meeting right, and you've got an edge just like this, where you're going to have one weld here, and you're going to have a seam here, or you might have a weld. Sometimes it can look better or even be better to tie that weld in. It just makes it easier to tie the weld in just by going ahead and putting in a pass here and then tying all that in together. It depends on how far that plate is. It's not necessary. Like I said, there's not a lot of load on this. That's mostly just to make your life a little bit easier. So for me personally, I grind this out a little bit. I put in a root pass, and then I put a pass here, make sure that's, decently even, and then I just come back and forth and put one pass. If this gets too far out, obviously you're going to end up with too wide of a pass. But because this doesn't require a lot of strength, I know somebody in the comments are going to say, well, you don't want too wide of a weave pass. You're supposed to put stripper passes only with 70/18. This is not getting a lot of load. So for me, I would rather just go ahead and make this a clean, easy pass that's good. I know good and well that this is strong enough for what this is. So for me, that's what I would rather do. Like I said, this is not very wide of a weave pass. So that's just me personally. There's no reason that you can't do that on this weld. Secondly, if you struggle with a vertical weld, a couple tips here is go ahead and get you a 332 and do this with a 332 rather than a 1/8. And then the second thing is make this weld pass first. That's if you struggle with 70/18 on a vertical weld. If you don't really struggle, like for me, I just go ahead and I'm already using 1/8, and I weld enough that I just go ahead and do all of this with 1/8. I don't worry about going ahead and grabbing a 332, although I could make this look slicker and it could be a prettier, closer to an Instagram weld if I were to not use a 1/8 and go ahead and take a 332. But I'm wanting to give you a real life example. What I'm trying to do is give you an example what you could do if you need to impress a boss or something like that. If you're on a job and you're having trouble, you can't quite use that 1/8 and make that look good, then go ahead and pull that 332 out, turn it down, and put it on quick, and then turn it back up and use this. It is faster to use this 1/8. So for me personally, I'm going to just take everything. Come on out over here. I'm going to just do everything with 1/8 because I know that I can make it look good enough, and I know that I can make it be good enough, and I can be faster. So at the end of the day, speed is what I'm after because I know that I've gotten to that point. Okay, so after that, it's simple. It's pretty easy. You just weld all of this out, nothing hard. You know, you do that one first, but get you some weld under here, guys. These don't have to be as pretty, okay? But I want to see you get a little weld underneath here. You've already got weld here, so put you some weld here and put as much weld in right here. If you can put 70-18, I'd rather see you put 70-18 right here. But if you can't, then just get your 60-11. I won't tell anybody, and just put you some 60-11. I'd rather see you use 60-11 on this than not using anything at all. Weld here, weld here. I would put some 70-18 here and on the back side, and then put you some weld there. Once you've done that, you've pretty well got it, guys. So that pretty well covers that, guys. Your clips are different on every building. It depends on how wide your I-beam is. It depends on whether or not you're using I-beam trusses. It depends on how big your C-purlin is. All of that depends. There's different variables in there. So it's not like I can tell you an exact recipe for that. You look those specs up online when you're building your building. These are just basic things to go over once you've got all of those specs, okay? Because it also depends on how far apart your trusses are. Because I know I'm going to get some people in there in the comments like, well, tell me exactly this, tell me how big this is. That kind of stuff you need to look up online. And always, I'm not, like I said, I'm not telling you that I'm an engineer, okay? All I'm doing is telling you how I'm building this based on buildings I've built in the past by engineers. Afterwards, I can just get an engineer to come out here and sign off on the whole job once I'm done. But I'm confident in what I've got, so that's what I'll do. All right, guys, I think that about covers it. If you do have any questions, please put them in the comments. As always, share, like, subscribe. Thank you so much.